Chapter 7. Salvador caught hold of Lupita and carried her halfway down the ladder, where they stopped and hung motionless. Silencio, he whispered into her ear. Lupita stopped breathing. When a loud clanging sound announced the presence of one of the guards outside their metal car, she gasped in spite of herself. To her great relief, no one came to inspect the car. Finally, she heard the voices of the gringo guards fade, and then Salvador said, "We can go down now, Lupita." They dropped, and Lupita sank in exhaustion. In a few minutes, the freight train gave a sudden lurching that flung her backward. Just as she got to her feet in the dark, a second lurch threw her over again. At last, the train started up in earnest, going slowly at first, then picking up speed. "Salvador!" Lupita cried softly, afraid to get up. "I am here. Don't be afraid," he laughed triumphantly. Lupita understood why he was happy. They were in the United States at last and on their way to Indio and Aunt Consuelo. And jobs. Unlike poor Señor Rosario and his family, she and Salvador had succeeded. Lupita put out her hand and touched Salvador's arm for reassurance. On and on the train went, making click-clack noises on the rails, grinding metal on metal until it came to a stop. Lupita had no idea how long they had been in the hopper, but it seemed to have been an hour at least. She and Salvador did not move. They sat together in the darkness as their car was uncoupled, put into a sliding with a good deal of jerking and jolting coupled to another train. All this work was done to the loud accompaniment of gringo voices outside. "Where are we, Salvador?" Lupita asked. "I do not know. Perhaps in this Los Angeles Señor Rosario talked about." Then he added, "Lupita, I think we're being attached to another train. Perhaps that will take us to Indio." "Sí, to Indio," Lupita agreed happily. The train rolled smoothly to the east, clattering over the rails, booming warnings at automobile crossings like some great bull. After a long time, it stopped. Their car was one of the three taken off. Uncoupled, it glided noiselessly along the rails until it was brought to a halt with a terrific thump. A moment later, the second uncoupled car from the freight struck it, knocking Lupita and Salvador over on their backs. Next, they heard the sounds of the freight train's engines as it pulled out of the yards, leaving them behind. They sat in the bottom of the hopper, listening to the train's noises fade away. All about them was silence, an eerie, dead silence. Where were they? Had they come to Indio? "We'll wait a while in here," Salvador told Lupita. "Then I'll go up to the top and look around." Lupita could hear her brother's labored, quick breathing. He was nervous as she. After 5 minutes, he got up and started to search for the ladder. A soft grunt signaled that he found it. In a minute, he was back stumbling into her. "Lupita, there's nothing here but tracks and buildings and 3 railroad cars. There are no guards. Nobody. Dawn's coming. I've seen a better place for us to hide. Hurry up." Delighted to be out of the hopper's blackness, Lupita followed him up the ladder, through the turret, and down the exterior steps to the ground. Streaks of pink and gold were showing in the east. "Come on, Lupita." They went along to the car behind them. It was a boxcar like the one Señor Rosario and his family had entered. Suddenly, Lupita held back. Salvador grabbed her hand and spoke softly. "It will be cooler in there when the sun is up, Lupita. We can see outside, and we don't have to worry that anyone will fill it with flour or grain." Lupita glanced back over her shoulder at the hopper car with horror. Ay de mi, she had not thought of that. Of course the hopper must have been brought here to be filled with something. She shivered, thinking of suffocating under so much flour, and scrambled up to the boxcar as fast as she could. Thirsty and still hungry, after devouring what little food remained, the two of them sat in one corner of the boxcar until sunset. They had seen no one yet and decided to go out after dark to find out where they were. Dusk had fallen when they had suddenly heard a dog barking. The two of them froze in their corners. A dog? It went on barking, but over it came a baritone voice singing, "In the graveyard of forgetfulness, give burial to my longing. Deny that I have loved you. I ask you a favor. Te lo pido por favor." As the man repeated the last line, Lupita realized that she knew the song. The singer must be Mexican or pocho. Salvador, whispered Lupita eagerly. Call out to him, Lupita. He will think you are a boy and don't mean him any harm. Lupita went to the side of the door of the boxcar and called, Señor, Señor, por favor. Who is there? Asked the man in Spanish. Lupita remembered the name Salvador had bestowed upon her in Tijuana. Eduardo Torres. Señor, where am I? And the man asked a strange question. Who is with you? My brother Salvador. She hesitated, then asked, Are you a Mexicano? No, I am Americano. He is a pocho, Lupita hissed to Salvador. Come down out of there. I work for this railroad. You are not supposed to be in there. This railroad property. Ay de mia, guard. Were pocho railroad guards too? Guardia? She cried. The man laughed and called up to her. Come down. I am not the guard. Let me have a look at you. Lupita peeked carefully around the corner of the boxcar door into the brown eyes of a stocky man wearing blue coveralls and a high-crowned blue cap. He was smiling while he patted a large brown dog who was not even growling now. A quick glance showed Lupita that he had a flashlight but no pistol. Where are we, senor? She repeated. In Colton. Where do you want to be? Indio, where Aunt Consuelo lives. Indio? That is 80 gringo miles from here over the San Gregorio Mountains and into the desert. He shook his head. Come down now, muchachos. Si, replied Lupita, crestfallen that they were so far from their destination, but relieved by the friendliness of this pocho. After she and Salvador had got down, the man asked them, Did you just come up from Mexico? He chuckled. No, don't tell me. I don't want to hear you lie. I know that you did. Si, we did, agreed Salvador, and eyeing the dog, it had begun growling. How do we get to this Indio then, senor? The man smiled. You could take a bus from Colton to Indio if you have the money. It would cost you around $3 gringo each. We only have pesos, Salvador said. They didn't have the equivalent of $6 gringo in any event. Pesos are no good here, the man spoke very pleasantly. But even if you could take the bus, you don't know enough English to buy the ticket or to ask someone where to get off when you come to Indio. Surely La Migra would catch you. La Migra? Lupita asked. Si, the gringo immigration officers. They hunt all the time for people like you. They look for aliens who do not have green card permits to work over here. They are not like the border police then? Salvador asked. No, they work everywhere, not only at the border. La Migra? Lupita filed the name in her memory. First Mexican robbers, then a fat coyote, then gringo robbers on the hillside, the border patrol, the railroad guards, and now La Migra? She looked at Salvador and he looked at her. Señor, por favor, he asked. Tell us what road to take to Indio. We will walk there. Will you? The men of La Migra travel the road all the time in their automobiles. He grinned at Lupita. My name is Esposito, Hector Esposito. Perhaps I can find you a safer way for you to get to Indio later on. You two came here to work, eh? Si, senor, we did, answered Salvador. Esposito nodded. My brother owns a cafe here and that serves Mexican food. He sometimes needs older boys to work for him. Besides the cafe, there is a little motel that needs workers too. It is a pity that your brother isn't a girl. Señor Esposito, Lupita took off the baseball cap and let her braids fall down her back. I am Lupita Torres, not Eduardo, she said shyly. We come from Ensenada. I have worked there as a maid in a hotel helping my mother. Bueno. Go to my car, the blue van over there, he said, pointed to the west of the tracks. Get into the back and stay there until I finish my work here. Then I will take you to my brother's cafe. Are you hungry? At Lupita's nod, he said, There are tortillas in a metal box in my car. Eat a tortilla, but leave the other food for me. There's coffee, too, in a jug. Have some coffee if you wish. Gracias, señor Esposito, Salvador said, and he and Lupita started towards the van. Minutes later, they were sitting inside the old blue van eating corn tortillas and drinking coffee from the thermos. After she had eaten, Lupita immediately fell asleep on the van's floor, and a little later Salvador nodded off too. They were awakened several hours later when Señor Esposito and his dog climbed into the front seat. They drove through the town of Colton to an alley behind a cafe and motel. There, Esposito opened the van's rear and ordered the children out and led them into the cafe kitchen through the back door. Rodrigo, Rodrigo, he called out. While they waited, Lupita looked about, sniffing the familiar odors of chili and peppers. The big kitchen was divided into several parts. 3 cooks in white clothing worked at the big stoves, putting beans, rice, and enchiladas into plates that dark-haired waitresses in bright red dresses picked up at the counter. They spoke to each other in Spanish. On the other side of the kitchen stood a black-haired boy about Salvador's age, scraping uneaten food off plates into a big garbage pail. Then he put the soiled dishes into a square metal machine and pulled a lever which brought hot water and hot air through the device. As Lupita looked on in wonder, dishes rapidly came out clean and dry. A short man in a ruffled white shirt, black string tie, red sash, and black trousers came out finally to look at Lupita and Salvador. Then he asked Hector in Spanish, "Where did you find these two?" "In the customary place, Rodrigo, the freight yard. They seek work." "Do they? They always seek jobs." Rodrigo Esposito had a queer rumbling chuckle that started deep in his burial chest. "How old are they?" Salvador raised their ages. 20, senor, and my sister is 17. The cafe owner chuckled once more. "I would say 15 and 12, but no matter. I need some help here. Do you speak any English?" "No, they don't, Rodrigo," Hector Espinoso replied. "They are called Salvador and Lupita Torres. The girl says she has worked as a chambermaid in Mexico. Bueno, perhaps the motel can use her. This boy can work here with a dishwashing machine. Have you told him yet what he must pay?" "Pay?" Lupita felt stabbed. Whom did they have to pay? "No, I have not told them," Hector laughed. "You tell them. Your Spanish is as good as mine, brother. Just be sure to pay me my share. Adios, Rodrigo." Without another word, the pocho turned and left. The cafe owner motioned to Salvador and Lupita, "Come into my office." Lupita and Salvador followed him into a small room behind the kitchen where he sat down at a desk and looked at them. "In order for you to work here, you and your sister must have what is called a social security card. I can get one for you from someone who forges them. Of course, this card costs money. Salvador, I will pay you $2.50 an hour. That is about 50 pesos. Lupita gasped at the amount. Salvador was very lucky. The man smiled and went on. "The first week you work for me, you will pay 1/3 of what you earn to the man who makes your forged card. You will pay another third to my brother Hector." "A third to him?" Salvador asked in astonishment. "See, would you have got to work here without Hector? He surely saved you from La Migra. You and your sister can eat your meals here and rent a room from me in a house I own behind the motel. You will only have to pay $140 a month. That is very cheap here in the United States. Now, boy, you can get something to eat while I take your sister to my cousin, Señor Efren, who owns the motel. When you have finished, tell Valentin, the boy at the dishwasher, to show you how to run the machine." Señor Rodrigo waved his hand and Salvador went out to the kitchen. "Muchacha, you come with me." Señor Efren Esposito was small-boned, thin, and older than his cousin. The two men spoke in Spanish while Lupita stood by, gazing past them at the lobby filled with beautiful red vinyl-covered chairs and tile-topped black iron tables. Suddenly, Señor Efren asked her, "Where did you work in Mexico?" "In Ensenada, señor, at the hotel of Señor Aguilar where my mother works. I helped her clean and make beds for gringo tourists." "So," Señor Efren addressed the cafe owner, "I guess I have a uniform small enough for this girl." He turned to Lupita. "One thing, muchacha. Do not expect to enjoy an afternoon siesta here as you do in Mexico. We work all day until 6 o'clock. He spoke to Señor Rodrigo again. "I'll pay $2.25 an hour and put Concha in charge of her." "My mother taught me the words sheet and towel and soap, señor," Lupita volunteered. "Sí," he replied disinterestedly. Then he asked the cafe owner, "Has she been told of the forged card?" "She heard me tell her brother. She knows she is to pay Hector and her rent." "Bueno, She can start work tomorrow morning, Senor Efren sniffed. She's thin as a snake. Can you fatten her up so she'll be strong enough to run a vacuum cleaner, Rodrigo? I'll try. Her brother is stuffing himself right now. Come on, girl. You're next to eat. Senor Rodrigo showed Lupita the small yellow painted house on the other side of the alley. That is where you will stay with your brother and Concha, one of the maids from the hotel. The other boy who operates my dishwasher lives there too. They are both Mexicans like yourself. When you and your brother are not working, try to stay inside the house unless you're with people who know some English. Do not call attention to yourself here. Sí, señor Esposito. Gracias, gracias. Her heart singing with joy, Lupita said, I'm not hungry, so I'll go to the house if you don't mind. Suit yourself. Esposito turned toward the cafe. Lupita, alone at last, opened the door of the little house where she and Salvador were to live. They had work. The first week would go by fast, and when they had paid Senor Hector and the man who forged the social security cards and Senor Rodrigo for their beds, they would still have something to send to Mama. The week after, there would be even more money. If she and Salvador were to stay inside the house, how could they spend their money? How quickly their luck had changed from bad to good. The yellow house was sparsely furnished, but to Lupita it seemed very fine. Each of the 2 bedrooms contained 2 single beds, a chair, a chest of drawers, and a clothes closet. There was a tiny bathroom and a little living room, too, with 4 chairs, a table, and a plastic cloth, and a transistor radio. The beautiful draperies were of paper printed with big red poinsettia blossoms. Concha, a thin woman, older than Mama, was friendly and full of advice. She told Lupita at once, You have just come to this country and know nothing as yet. I have a warning for you. Sometimes the gringos who stay in the hotel try to talk with the maids. If one does speak to you, smile and get away as fast as you can. Point to a room down the hall and make him think you are too busy to talk. Do not let him know you are from Mexico and cannot speak English, or he may call La Migra to come get you. Why would a gringo call La Migra about me? Concha laughed. Who knows what a gringo will do? They are very strange. Work hard and do not talk to anyone, not even to me. Senor Efren does not like his mates to stand around talking to one another. Sí, Lupita nodded. Senor Aguilar had not liked that either. She looked across the living room at Salvador, who was talking with Valentin. They must be talking about the dishwasher. Valentin was making motions with his hands as if he was using machinery. Lupita looked away from them to the poinsettias on the draperies as she relaxed in her chair. Bueno. Concha would teach her, and Valentin would help Salvador. How lucky they were to find work so soon and friendly Mexicans to help them. The next morning, after a stand-up breakfast in the cafe, Lupita started her job as a chambermaid. The work was similar to what Mama did in Ensenada, but Lupita found it very hard. There she had helped out now and then, but now she had 15 bedrooms on the 2nd floor of the motel to clean by herself. Floors to vacuum, bathrooms to scour, furniture to dust, and 25 beds to change. 16 were single beds, but the other 9 were very large. So large that Lupita had to keep circling them and lifting the great mattress to tuck in the sheets and the blankets. By midday, her arms ached, and she could hardly push the vacuum over the thick rugs. After that heavy work, cleaning the toilets and putting up fresh towels seemed restful. Halfway through the afternoon, Senor Efren came up the outside stairs to check Lupita's work. He asked her what room she had finished, and then he unlocked their doors and went inside. She waited, worried, on the veranda overlooking the street. Would her work be good enough? Was she too weak to suit him? When he came out the last room, he nodded at her and went down the steps to the lobby. He was satisfied. Lupita let out her breath and went back to work. By 6 o'clock, she was exhausted, almost too weary to talk with Salvador, who came to sit beside her in Senor Rodrigo's kitchen and eat a dinner of enchiladas, beans, and rice. How did it go? Did you have any trouble, he asked. No, but it is hard. Some of the beds are very big. See, the work here is hard. Salvador mopped his forehead with his arm. The water in the dishwasher is very hot, and if I am not careful, I can get scalded. How much food these gringos leave on their plates. I wish we had it in Tijuana. He smiled. But I like the dishwashing machine. It is interesting. Bueno, Salvador. Lupita was too tired to say more. Lupita, I have talked with Valentin while we work. Lupita's interest rose. Senor Rodrigo does not care if you talk and work at the same time? Not as long as we get the dishes washed. Valentin has told me how to send money down to Mexico. He knows all of the ways. Lupita finished her food, being careful not to get a stain on her white uniform. What are they? He says I can take our money to a bank here, open an account, and send Mama a piece of paper called a check. She can take it to a bank in Ensenada and get pesos for it. Go to a gringo bank? Trust Yankee strangers? Lupita shook her head fearfully. Salvador nodded in agreement. Another way is to go to the post office and buy a money order to send to Mama. One of the pocho cooks, the fat one over there, Salvador jerked his thumb towards the kitchen, and Lupita saw a heavy-set middle-aged man behind the counter, is a good man. He told Valentin he would get us the money orders, but that is not the way Valentin sends money to his family in Mexicali. How does he do it? He writes a letter and puts cash into the envelope. Then he seals it, registers it at the post office, and mails it. Lupita's eyes grew wide as she leaned over the table to speak softly. Salvador, someone could steal the money. Not if the letter is registered. Valentin's always reaches his family. They write him and tell him so. Concha takes his letters and registers them. She speaks English well enough for that, he says. Lupita's teeth sunk into her lower lip. See, this would be the safest way. Less danger of being caught by La Migra. After a moment, she nodded. When we are paid, I will write Mama a letter and we will include what money we can. I will tell her that we will send more in the next letter. Salvador grinned as he began to eat his third tortilla. What will you write to her? Lupita stared gravely at him, then looked about her at the busy, noisy kitchen. I will not write her of the money we must pay for cards in order to work here. I will not tell her how we were robbed in Mexico, or about the coyote, or about the old man who was murdered. I won't tell her how hard it was for us in Tijuana. That would make her sad. But I will tell her how we crossed over, covered up with the vegetables. That will make her laugh. And Uncle Antonio, too. I will not tell her about giving up Papa's cross or Dorotea's knife. But I will tell her that we have good paying jobs here and we go to Indio as soon as we can. I will tell her that we will stay in Colton until we have learned the English we need to take a bus, and promise to write to Aunt Consuelo and tell her where we are so she shouldn't be worried about us. Salvador nodded approvingly. Bueno, that will do. But when we are paid for the first time, we must also buy some new clothing. We only have rags. See, I know. I need to buy a dress so I can go to Mass. Concha told me last night that there is a church here that pochos go to. They speak Spanish there. She said if I had a dress, I could go with her. Clothing costs much here in the United States, but I will buy the cheapest dress I can find. Salvador looked sour. He did not like the idea of buying a cheap shirt. He liked handsome things that had luster and color, but Lupita knew he would be careful of the price. Salvador, where will we buy our clothes? Valentin knows a store where they speak Spanish. He will take me there. It probably sells dresses for girls, too. Get Concha to take you on the day she registers our first letter to Mama. Sí, I will ask Concha. Lupita's first week in Colton was spent working, eating in Senor Rodrigo's cafe, listening to music on the little radio, and sleeping in a room with Concha. 2 gringos in the motel tried to talk with her, but she found Concha's advice worked very well. Neither gringo followed her when she hurried down the hallway and into an empty room. During that week, Lupita also learned that Concha was not always so agreeable. Sometimes after work, she was cross and snappish, complaining that her feet hurt. Sometimes she came back to the little house to lie down before she went over to the cafe to eat. At those times, Lupita left her alone. She and Salvador would need Concha's help and goodwill. On Friday morning, Salvador and Lupita received their wages. Though what they owed for the forged cards and a week's room and board had been subtracted, there was still money left over, enough to buy a shirt and a dress and to send some to Mama. That Friday morning, Concha was in a better mood, and she promised she would cross the street to the post office on her afternoon break and mail Lupita's letter. At noon, Lupita got the letter she had written, nervously put in the cash she and Salvador had agreed to send, sealed it, and handed it to Concha along with $4 for the registration. The next day after lunch, Concha took Lupita to a discount store close to the motel and helped her pick out a dress. It was made of dark blue cotton, had a belt, and the cloth was so heavy that Lupita did not need to buy a petticoat. Neither Lupita nor Concha had to work on Sundays, so they went to Mass at the small white Pocho church. There, Lupita found nothing to make her uncomfortable. The priest spoke in Spanish, and she was able to light a candle at the altar for Papa's soul, as she was certain Mama was doing this morning in Ensenada. As they left the church, Concha asked Lupita, "Did you pray for your family?" "Sí, for my ma and my brothers and sisters." "And for Salvador and yourself?" "No, I forgot to do that." Lupita stopped on the church steps. "But I gave thanks for coming here safely to Colton." "You should have prayed for yourself. Take care, Lupita. Take care not to anger Señor Efren or Señor Rodrigo. Do not make them displeased." As they left the steps, Concha went on, "They can call La Migra whenever they want to." "Why would they do that, Señorita Concha?" Concha's eyes bore into Lupita's. "Because some other Mexicans might come along willing to work for less money than you or Salvador. Perhaps they will like some other girl's looks better. To get rid of you, all they have to do is call La Migra and say they have just learned that you were not a pocha but a wetback." Lupita's hands went to her mouth in terror. "I am always afraid," Concha continued. "Day and night I am afraid. Do not be bold, pray for yourselves, and be careful." "Sí, I will be careful." Then Lupita asked to change the subject. "Where did you learn the English you know?" "From the chambermaid who was here before you. She went back to her family in Mexico." "You did not learn it from a book then?" No. Concha looked astonished. "Should I learn some English too? A little would help you, I think. When I have time, I will teach you the words I know." "Gracias. Perhaps someday I will buy a book that is in Spanish and in English too." "No," Concha advised. "You would have to go to a bookstore, and the person there would surely know that you are a Mexican and call La Migra." "Again, La Migra. Always La Migra. It must be everywhere." Yet Lupita could not believe that anything terrible would happen in Colton. From what she had seen, the small gringo city was a pretty one, even if it had no blue ocean bays like Ensenada. Instead, it was ringed with sharp peaked mountains that changed from blue to brown to violet at different times of the day. The houses were constructed of wood, and they were painted white, yellow, green, and tan instead of pink, blue, and lavender like the homes in Tijuana and Ensenada. Concha had told her that only one family lived in each house. How rich these gringos were! Yet, there were some things that Lupita missed. No trumpet and guitar music could be heard on the streets. See, there was Latin music in Señor Rodrigo's cafe, but it was so soft she had to strain her ears to hear it. Concha said that was how the gringos liked their music, almost inaudible, as if their ears were very tender. There were no people selling things on the streets either. All of the buying and selling went on indoors. These gringos did not smile at one another or stop to chat. They seemed to go about their business as quickly and seriously as possible. Even eating in Señor Rodrigo's cafe, which should have been a great pleasure, was speedily done. See, Concha was correct in saying that gringos were very strange indeed. The next week, Lupita struck up an acquaintance with Linda, one of the pocha waitresses in the cafe. They often talked while Lupita was eating in the kitchen. On Wednesday, Linda took Lupita to the shoe store next door and helped her buy a much-needed pair of white shoes with sturdy crepe soles. She later agreed with a complaining Lupita that the shoes had cost far too much money. Lupita admired Linda's pretty face, her red fingernails, her golden hoop earrings, and the scent of perfume that always surrounded her. Clearly, she was a favorite of Señor Rodrigo. He always had a smile for her, even when he had none for anyone else. The pocho cooks told Salvador that Linda made more money in tips than any of the other waitresses because she was the most popular. As Lupita watched her admiringly, she thought that being a waitress must be a very good job. She would like to be able to do that work herself, but even in a Mexican restaurant, a waitress must know English. Almost all the customers would be gringos. How lucky Linda was to be a pocha and know English as well as Spanish. That Friday evening, Lupita was just starting to eat her supper when Linda burst suddenly into the kitchen, waving her hands in the air. She ran over to Lupita and whispered into her ear, "La migra is here. They have come to raid for Mexicans. Get away, hurry!" Then she whirled about and rushed back through the swinging doors. La migra? In the dining room on the other side of the door?